Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast with Michelle Chalfant, a place to delve into who we are, how we got that way, and explore what it takes to be a healthy grown-up. With an extensive toolbox and guests with varied expertise, Michelle will lead us on a journey to learn what it's like to live authentically and to love ourselves just the way we are. And now, here's Michelle.
Hello, everybody. It's Michelle Chalfant, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. It is November. We are at podcast number 183, and I hope you all know what this month is. It's my birthday month. It's such an exciting time because not just for me, but I'm hoping to make it exciting for all of you. I absolutely appreciate every single one of you that listen to this show and share the show. And I often think back to when I myself was struggling with anxiety and depression and codependency, among other things, and wish that I had had something like this as a resource. And I didn't have it. So that's one of the main reasons. That is what keeps me going every single month doing the show, because I want to help as many people as possible. And I love that it's for free. And I love that when I hear people say, I share this with all my friends and family, I'm like, good, because we need help. And what I talk about and all the guests that I have on, I'm hoping that you find some or all of what we say as helpful to help you to shift, heal, and transform your own life. That is my goal. So this month, being that it's my birthday, I know that typically for our birthday, we get gifts, but I feel like all of you are such a gift to me. I want to give back. So this month, I am giving you all, as a big, huge thank you for following the show, a free month into the Adult Chair membership group. I want you all to have the opportunity to try it out, try it on for size, and see if you like it. I think you're going to love it. Every single month, I give a new theme, I give a new topic of the month, and we spend one whole month working on a specific topic. We have done the inner child. We have done I matter, I'm okay, self-love. All of these things are in there, and you will have access to all of it when you join the membership for a month, and it's for free. So just check it out. I really believe that this is a transformational tribe. It's called the TAC Tribe. You can get more information at theadultchair.com/membership. And the promo code just for this month, it's just for my birthday month, is birthday. And I'm really extra excited about this because this month we're putting this membership on a brand new platform, and we are going to have an app attached to it. You will be able to access everything, the podcast, the meditations, all the self-discovery work, the live Q&A, all of it will be in an app. So come check it out. And if you are a current member, you also get this month for free. Everybody. It's my way of saying thank you. The only thing that I would love for you to do, and I ask this every month of November, is to please keep doing what you're already doing, which is share the show. I'm so appreciative to all of you for doing that. And if you want to give me like a cherry on the sundae and extra love to Michelle for my birthday, if you could go to iTunes and give me a review, I would be so happy. So thank you. All right, there we have it. I want to talk a little bit about what Karen Gelstein and I, my special guest for today, and I are talking about. I think you're going to love this show. We're talking all about really understanding our defenses. We're going under the hood when it comes to our defenses. And we're talking about not only that, but also how we then can regain emotional balance with ourselves and with others when we are in defenses. So think about being triggered. What do we do? Or think about throwing up a defense after we are triggered. What do we do? This is what she and I talked about today. We went into what some of our defenses are, like humor, sarcasm, love addiction, codependency. Believe it or not, these are all defenses. This is what Karen was sharing with us, even addiction. And we talk about intellectualizing, ruminating thoughts, all of the things that we do from the adolescent chair to push down our emotions. That's what a defense does. So we talked about what the defenses are and then how we work our way out of them to stay connected to ourselves. We talked about the wounded child, the inner child, and then how we heal, how we transform these defenses. Again, such a powerful, powerful show. Before we jump in to this episode, let me tell you just a little bit about Karen Gelstein. She's an LCSW, and she specializes in intimacy disorders, love addiction, sex addiction, codependency, shame, betrayal trauma. She has a private practice in New York City where she sees individuals and couples and does group therapy. Her work is very much guided by the attachment theory as well as somatic experiencing, and she is an integrative therapist and a phenomenal one at that. She's one of my go-to people. So without further ado, here we go with this amazing show. And here we are with Karen Gelstein. Welcome to one of my favorite people, Karen Gelstein. Thank you so much for being on the Adult Chair podcast today.
Thank you, Michelle. It's an honor to be here and to be recording this today with you.
Yeah. I mean, this is our second show together. I am trying to remember, gosh, you were on maybe 2 or 3 years ago? 2 years. No.
Oh my God. Has it been that? It's been a while. Time flies.
I know. I'm going to have to reference that in the show notes, the other show that we were on together or that I had you on for, because it was another great show. That was on Love Addiction, Love Avoidant. You did a great show. I believe that was the one.
I think that was it.
It was a great show. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today. We have this is a really powerful topic. And when you and I were talking about a few weeks ago, I was like, yes, that's it. Understanding the defenses and the key to connection. And I find that so many people, we live with defenses and we have no idea how to get out of them. And then how do we reconnect with ourselves and others? So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that today. So thank you. Thanks for joining us again with all your wisdom and your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. And first, I really just want to put out there how much I admire your work, your commitment, your dedication to your clients, to your larger audience, and just the work that you do to pull together, so much information from so many therapists and healing community, and just the effort that it takes to, capture all this information and to make it available to people essentially all over the world at a minimal price. And, what you're really doing is helping people find their way back to connection to themselves so they can have hopefully a more joyful, fulfilling life. And I just honor everything about your work and what you do. And it's an honor to be here to talk about defenses today and healing the inner child.
Thank you. That means so much coming from you because I know what a fabulous therapist you are, but really just a fabulous human being. So thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it. All right, let's jump in. Where do you want to begin? I love this because one of my favorite things that really on my own healing journey was working. I think one of the most powerful things that I did with myself is working with the inner child. So let's start out talking about how does someone even develop? We talk about the inner child and the wounded child. How does the inner child get wounded? Like, how does that happen? Where does it come from? And again, how do I even know if my child is wounded? But let's start out with what even happens to the inner child.
Well, it's a great question. And, the way children become wounded, I mean, there's so many different facets, but just to give some concrete examples, if we start, with the family of origin and sort of that nuclear family, there's issues of, there could be physical abuse, there could be emotional abuse. Emotional abuse could show up in different ways. It could be, an overbearing parents, over controlling, angry parents who engage with children in a shaming way. And then there's also the parents where there's sheer neglect, right? Where people just aren't around, aren't giving guidance and emotional care and support to children. So it could be physical abuse, emotional abuse in different ways. When you look at dysfunctional families, and if there's addiction in families, right, there's a lot of dysfunction and a lot of emotions, right, going on at the level of parents or primary caretakers. And through all of that, children get neglected in so many different ways. And the issue with that is children internalize everything. So when things go wrong, it's a defense system for a child to automatically blame themselves. It's not a conscious process, but it's that internalization of the family dysfunction that then creates the wounded child.
And, so oftentimes I realize listening to other podcasts and even people I've had on here, we talk about dysfunctional families and how extreme, like there's extreme neglect or anything like that. But I find too, with the inner child, just in the work I do with my clients, sometimes it's not even, it could be extreme, of course, but sometimes it's not even that extreme. And I find there's the lost child or the wounded child. Can you talk a little bit about what that might look like in a family? We all know what the extreme looks like, right? What about like the child that maybe just didn't get a lot of hugs or attention or, affection or hearing I love you and that you matter? That in itself can create like a child that wonders like, am I lovable? Like, but the family didn't have alcohol abuse or neglect, but can you touch on that just a little bit? That sometimes it's what would seem like benign things that actually create dysfunction and the loss of the inner child.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's such a great point that you brought up, because I think historically what's been missed a lot in therapy is just looking at emotional neglect, right? And that doesn't have to show up in any extreme way, right? It could be, families where, there wasn't a lot of fighting, right? You had parents who were there. You had an intact nuclear family, right? There certainly were safety issues, but just the emotional neglect, right? The research shows that emotional neglect can cause as many issues with self-worth, right, as sort of more extreme circumstances. And so to your point, I think just even the lack of attunement emotionally to children becomes very problematic, especially during their developmental years if it's consistent. So like you said, children don't know how to regulate their own feelings, that we learn how to navigate emotions through co-regulation. And so children also can't articulate all that they're feeling because they're children and their brains are developing. And so that word emotional attunement is really critical. And that means that sometimes a parent attuning into my child looks off. They look sad and I can sense it, but they're not talking about it. And so that ability to sort of zero into your children's emotions and to address them and affirm them and then to nurture them through that, what you're doing is you're letting your children know that your emotions are healthy and that they're normal. Everyone has them, and I'm going to validate them, and then I'm going to parent and nurture you through that. So in these cases, you're really helping children have an emotional dialogue. And that's really what's important for growing into emotional maturity. So even just that subtlety can really create, the lack of it can leave a child thinking, like you said, am I lovable? Are my emotions valuable?
Yeah.
Do my emotions matter?
Right. Because I have clients that will come in and they'll say, I had a great childhood, blah, blah, blah. And then, but yet they're emotionally shut down and their inner child, we would say, would be wounded or lost. And after further digging, the only thing they might not have gotten was like hugs, or again, there's no emotional attunement from that parent. So it seems so subtle because all their needs were met, right? And they took family vacations and everything was great, but just little things were missing that created an adult that really has issues with emotions and with the inner child. So how would I know if my child is wounded, my inner child?
So I think, to give some real world examples, I mean, in adulthood, just to sort of say, wow, do I think I have a wounded child in there?
Mm-hmm.
I think looking at the quality of your relationships is a great first place to look, right? And it's looking across the board. It's looking at all kinds of relationships in your life. It could be in the workplace. It could be with friends. It could be with intimate partners. And if you have a history of a lot of chaos or drama or, very intense romantic relationships or the absence of romantic relationships, if you have a lot of fights with friends or, you lose friends, you cut people off. So if there's a lot of disruption in relationships, if you have a hard time keeping jobs or if there's any kind of pattern in your life in this area, you might want to stop and get curious about that. And that could be coming from, the wounded child, which has to get compartmentalized, but then it holds a lot of power and over people in their life. So that's one way to start to say, wow, what's going on here? Where's this coming from? And then, there's a whole bunch of defenses, right, that start to take place. And maybe if we can name some of the defenses, that's another way someone can say, wow, do I do that? Yeah. And that would be a pathway into more introspection and self-reflection.
Great. Yeah. Let's talk about these defenses.
Sure. So, defenses, when we're looking at defenses, I like to categorize them in two ways. There's the defenses of perceptions and how we perceive events going on in our life. And then there's also behaviors, and they could work simultaneously with one another. So, for example, defenses could show up in terms of rationalizing. Do you stay with a boyfriend who constantly hurts you, is not available, but you say, oh, this is just how men are. So do you stay in friendships where, friends are not nice and you sort of just think, oh, this is how it is. So that would be rationalizing. And so that's a kind of defense. When things go wrong, do you look to rationalize them? Oh, it's just because of this. And again, if this is a pattern, anybody can do these things in a one-off. But what we really want to help listeners to look at is, do they see a pattern of these things? So, right. So other defenses could be, do you live in a lot of judgment? Of others? Do you minimize things? Or some people don't connect to emotions at all, and they just live like intellectualizing everything. Like that's a defense. The one that I see a lot, especially in addiction, is I call it shame blame. And so it's really when somebody holds you accountable for something that is obvious that you've done wrong, and they turn it around in deflection. And they just blame others. What they're really trying to do is get away from their own shame. So
can you give us an example? That's a really good one. I like everything you're giving us so far, but tell us how people do that with addictions.
Well, I can give some, real world examples when I'm working with couples. And if one of the partners is still in a bit of denial about addiction, when the other partner who's being victimized might say, you've done this or that, right? Which are real events, which are facts. The other person, instead of saying, you're right, and I'm really sorry, and they can connect to a sense of their healthy shame, right? Mm-hmm. Where owning what you've done should evoke a sense of healthy shame when you have more emotional maturity and more of a sense of self-worth. But I get a lot of situations where the person is trying to hold their partner accountable, and the partner, instead of being accountable, right, deflects and starts saying, well, you do all these things and this is your fault. And I've done that because you act this way. And they can't just sit with their own behavior. It gets turned to the others, and they live in blame.
Yes. It like it gets spun around. It's almost, is it always gaslighting, would you say? Or is it just sometimes spinning it back on them and making it their fault, the other person's fault?
It's definitely gaslighting. And it's not to say that a point or two that they're saying about their partner, there might be some validity to do it. But when you're doing it in response to someone trying to hold you accountable for something, right, then it becomes deflection and it's gaslighting, and you're trying to make everything all the other person's fault.
Yeah.
And that's, shame is one of the most difficult emotions to sit with, and it gets transmuted into anger and blame in nanoseconds.
Yep. I agree with you there, but yeah, I've read some comments. I'm thinking of some of the Facebook groups that I have, and even on Instagram, people have said, what do I do about my husband? I tried to let him know that his drinking is bothering me, and he tells me it's my fault, or it gets spun back on them, right? And this is exactly what you're talking about. And I've said this is gaslighting. They can't own their reality that they're drinking too much, period. End of story. It turns into a defense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, for the partner, another defense could be living with sarcasm, right? Or living with bitterness, or just living now with judgment. And so these responses to some degree are understandable, but then if you're not able to do something about it, and now you stay in sarcasm and judging of your partner, you're also in your defenses.
Mm-hmm. Or how about the smile or the giggle when you are reporting something that really is not to be laughed at? Do you know what I'm saying? That's something that might be sad, and someone might giggle or laugh about it when they're reporting those facts.
Absolutely right. Usually I find that when people are doing that, they feel embarrassed. And they go to make a joke, or they smile. And that is a great way to kind of push down something that's truly embarrassing. And again, it's a hard emotion to sit with. But in the other way that you're talking about, one is avoiding the feeling.
Yes, exactly. Just avoid it altogether. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so these defenses are really a way of disconnecting you from your true emotional self. And so these defenses are really creating a disconnection to emotional intimacy with yourself at a deeper level.
What about codependency?
So codependency, in a very broad category, I see that as a disconnection from self. And then some of these smaller behaviors or defenses that we're talking about are all symptoms of codependency, right? And so it could be, needing affirmation from others to feel good about yourself. But the real emotional truth is maybe you feel sad, or you don't have good self-worth, and you have to sort of to grow out of the wounded child and to then move away from the teenage chair into the adult chair, right? You need to sort of put down these defenses, right? And sit with the uncomfortable emotions. So, with codependency, what you're doing is you're really looking at others to get your self-worth. And it leaves you very vulnerable to all kinds of dysfunctional relationships. And it keeps you in a state of disconnection from deeper and more vulnerable emotions. And then that keeps the wounded child encapsulated.
I have a question about what you just said about needing validation. With codependency, when someone needs validation from others, is it ever okay, in your opinion? How do you tell if it's a codependent act, or if it's just, hey, I just want to share with you about my day? So where's the fine line there?
I think that's a great question, a really great question. And the way I answer this to clients is sharing your day and wanting somebody to be interested is a normal part of healthy connection. But in certain questions, you're looking to be connected, but you're not looking to get your whole worth from how this person responds or whether they respond, right? And so the difference is, in healthy connection, of course, you want to share about your day. You might even want to go to them with issues or problems, right? To get sort of, what do you think? And that's part of what connection is all about, being there for one another. But there's a difference where when things do go awry, do you lose your whole sense of self-worth because somebody's not validating you, someone's not listening to you, maybe somebody's not giving you the answer that you want? And can you kind of stay present with that? right? So there's a fine line between looking for validation for your sense of self-worth, or looking for some validation that's more just sort of helping you sort through a situation that could be confusing.
So what I'm hearing you say is if there's a dependency on validation, it's codependent versus just, I'd like to share with you what happened with my day, or, hey, this happened to me. I'm really excited. I just want to share with you. And that's different than needing it versus just sharing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the word dependency really captures it.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us about, what do you think about ruminating thoughts?
I think ruminating thoughts is another defense. And I think this is where fantasy comes in. And so earlier we were talking about defenses that alter perceptions. And then there's behaviors that people go to further help sort of numb the emotions, right? Or avoid the emotions. And so things like ruminating, fantasy, they're all part of a sophisticated defense system to avoid a feeling. And in my experience, when clients really get into that ruminating state, not always, but typically there's some feeling of toxic shame that they can't sit in, toxic shame and pain. And the ruminating is another way of avoiding that feeling and maybe staying connected to the other person. Because even in the rumination, well, it depends what the rumination is about, but if it involves another person, it's another way of staying connected and not really experiencing underneath that. There's usually feelings of deep pain or shame, grief.
Now, tell us the difference between shame and toxic shame.
Yeah, there's different kinds of shame, right? There is what we call healthy shame, right? And then there's the toxic shame. And with healthy shame, that's something that we all really need to be able to sit in, because our healthy shame tells us when we've truly done something wrong, right? The ability to connect to healthy shame and feel remorseful is a really important thing. It keeps us in our humility. It keeps us going from being better or less than in others. But when someone can connect to healthy shame, they still have a feeling that I'm okay underneath it. I'm not defective. This is embarrassing. And you know what? I feel contrite. I've done something really wrong here. And I can recognize that and say sorry with an empathic heart, right? That empathic heart means I'm really connecting to what I've done wrong. But I don't have an underlying sense that I am the defect. With toxic shame, it's much deeper. The sense of toxic shame is like, I am the problem. I'm defective, as opposed to this behavior is really embarrassing and I need to own it. So there's a subtle difference.
Okay. So do we all have shame?
Absolutely. That is a absolute part of the human condition.
How does that happen?
Well, again, when we're looking, if we could give examples with toxic shame, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Michelle, where, how does the wounded child, how does that start? What's the origins of that?
Yeah.
And it really goes back to, all kinds of neglect from subtle, like you were talking about, people who look like they had a really happy childhood. But when you dig deeper, right, there wasn't a lot of talk about feelings and emotions in support of that, right, to more extreme cases. And so, again, that gets internalized for the child that something is wrong with me. And that toxic shame is really the fuel for codependency, and then really the fuel for addictions, right? Because I see addictions as codependency in the extreme, or extreme forms of defenses.
Interesting. I like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, when you look at defenses and denial, it's really like everything in life, there's a continuum. And so I think in order for addictions to take place, you first have to have codependency. So not everyone who's codependent is going to form addiction. But I think if you have addiction, right, it's because there was some codependency to begin with. And then addiction is just more of codependency in the extreme. And so when you think about codependency, it is a complete disconnection from self. And so it could be in a less extreme way, right? It could just be holding on to relationships that's sometimes in a dysfunctional way. It could be an inability to get out of bad relationships. It could be the people pleasing, like you said, that word dependency, needing other people's validation of you to feel good about yourself. There could be sort of this dependency in place on others. And then if you take that further and you think about addiction, talk about needing immediate gratification to feel okay. So when I'm working with clients who have addiction, they're turning to that because they can't handle emotions at all. So if sometimes it could be good or bad emotions. So if they're in pain or something goes wrong, they have a fight, with a partner and they're angry. They don't know how to sit and process those emotions. And that will drive them to need to act out, to have a drink, right? To turn to sex, to go on a shopping spree. Yeah. And so what an extreme defense, right? It's even more extreme than just other kind of codependent behaviors, right? You need immediate gratification to feel okay about yourself. So you're now relying not only on another person, you are now relying on a behavior, right? To medicate.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. I agree with you there. With addiction, it's a disconnection from self and the inability, or the not knowing how, I should say. That sounds harsh, but feeling how to feel our emotions. So now what? So unless you have another defense, I'm wondering, how do we heal and transform these defenses then?
Yeah. And I think in terms of going forward, the more you can first understand what defenses are, right? And really kind of getting educated, looking at them. And then if the next step I say, and sometimes my work with clients is, well, now let's look back on your life and let's start to catalog. What are the behaviors that you identify, right? And make a catalog. Do I find myself rationalizing all the time, right? Do I turn to fantasy all the time? So what are the things, if someone tries to hold me accountable, am I immediately going to blame and deflecting? And so once you understand defenses are, if you can then sort of look at yourself through that self-reflective process and start to write down the things that one does, the more that you can catch and recognize when you're doing these things in the moment, the next thing would be to try and pause. And in that moment, even if you have to say out loud, I'm being defensive, say that over and over again to help sort of pause going to fantasy, or pause going to blame and judgment, pause when you want to rationalize something away. Just stop a second and attune into yourself and say, am I feeling something in this moment? And for many of my clients, it's hard for them to identify feelings. So I might give them a feeling chart and a body sensation chart. And if they can stop and pause and say, wow, I'm fantasizing, what am I actually escaping from? And if you really start to have more exquisite attunement to yourself, you might be able to sense, you know what? Yeah, there's a sadness in there. And say, okay, there's a sadness. Where do I feel that in my body? Right? What in my body tells me I feel sad? You know what? I feel it in my chest or my throat. And so what we're helping people to do is first recognize that they're being defensive. And if they can pause that, how do we help them deepen their connection to themselves, both emotionally and from a sensation perspective? And that's the pathway into reclaiming emotional connection and having more of an embodied experience with yourself.
And then how do you link in the inner child into that? Or is that the inner child?
I think that's the place where we start to greet our inner child,
The
right?
emotional part. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. The wounded part,
So,
right?
so tell me, in your experience with your clients, like, so what does this look like as far as someone then starts noticing what they're feeling? They're dropping in their bodies. They're starting to get in touch with this. They have cataloged their defenses. They're becoming much more aware of when they're doing it. They're starting to pause. What happens next with people that you find?
So the more people can start to pause when they're in these behaviors, and for so many people, what we want to help clients do is expand their tolerance for feelings, right? Because that's what's missing. And again, the wounded child doesn't have a parent to help them co-regulate. So how they're not learning how to experience and navigate their way through feelings. So when feelings come up, I use the analogy, they're so hot, right?
Yes.
I love the
Yeah.
hot, I love the running a hot bath analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever stick your toe, if you're running a bath and you stick your foot in, the water's too hot, you pull it out. But because the emotions feel too hot and overwhelming. But if you can sort of stick your toe in and start to tolerate the discomfort a little bit, the body adjusts. And now you're starting to digest feelings. You can connect with it. And through that process of connection, you're transforming the feelings and you're helping them digest. You're working them through so they have a chance to process and move through you, not just get compartmentalized and shoved back down. So when clients then say, wow, I'm being defensive, instead of just going on in that defensive spew about somebody or something, if they can turn inward and say, God, I'm being defensive, and then breathe, they might say, God, I'm just deeply sad. And that ability now to help them connect a little bit to pain and say, wow, I'm in pain. I can tolerate this. That is actually helping them greet the wounded child. And sometimes those feelings are so excruciating for people. And so just saying, I can tolerate this, even that is a support to helping you tolerate pain. Breathing, right? I can just do some breath work and try and let the pain move through my body. You are actually now moving from compartmentalization, which keeps the wounded child encapsulated, to transmuting those, to actually helping those feelings now get digested and resolved.
I know what this means, but in case someone's listening and does not know what this means, can you explain encapsulated inner child? What does that mean?
Yeah. And so again, as a survival, I think it's part of human nature. And I think everyone has some elements of a wounded child. And when I say the word encapsulated, as part of that survival instinct for children, when things go awry and a child internalizes it, like it's my fault, something's wrong with me, sometimes that's too much for a child to fully be aware of. And children are dependent, right? So they need to have the hope that a caretaker is going to be capable, right? Yeah. And so it's easier to think that I'm the problem, right? So there's still some sense of hope and connection, and that's what helps children to grow and to thrive. And so part of the wounded child has to go get moved into the subconscious, becomes a fractured part of self, and then sort of scar tissue grows over it. So the wounded child, it's not a conscious process. The feelings, right, that are too much for a child to process has to get sort of discarded. And so a child might think they, had a happy childhood, but part of that is the denial system and things children have to do to push the feelings away. And in that process, you're creating an encapsulated child because it's a fragmented part of self or sits in the subconscious.
Yeah. I know that when I do the work, I have a meditation actually on my website, and it's connecting to the inner child. And I take people on a journey of going to find their inner child and connecting with their inner child. Excuse me. And oftentimes people will report that their inner child is lost in the forest or locked in a basement or in a closet and it's locked and they can't get that child out. And then they get that child out in the course of the meditation. But that's kind of how I've always seen the encapsulated child or the lost child. They're just, like you said, they're kind of tucked away. They're fragmented away in the subconscious mind. And it's like, that's the loss of the feelings in the emotional body. It's that inner child that's truly like just been tucked away so deeply. We just don't have access. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And that's why your model, when we're talking about, chair work, and inner child work, what you're doing is you're asking somebody to move into mindfulness where that part of them right now gets, you're asking that part to climb out or look at your inner child. And by doing that, you're creating space to sort of observe the wounded child and engage with her, where for so many of us in the moments, right, our clients and any of us, we become fused with the pain, we become fused with the inner child. And in that fusion, there's no room for healing. And so moving to, you do so much work right around understanding the different chairs and which wound is showing up, right? Is it the teenage self? Is it a younger self? And so by looking, if it's a younger wound, by asking clients to look at her or him, to see them, you have more room, right, for you to stay in the adult chair when you separate the wound out. And when you can separate the wound out, you're able to sort of sit in more of your adult chair, right? Because you're less fused with that wounded part, and through the ability to engage with gives you the ability more to actually be able to connect maybe to some of that pain and work it through. And so that's what's so helpful about your model. And moving more into mindfulness, right, is where there's an opportunity for more healing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We have to, I say all the time, slow down. Like, right. In that defensive state, which is all these defenses are from the adolescent chair. They're the egoic structures that we are creating in order to, again, block those feelings. But we move so fast. That brain is going so quickly. We have to slow down and get in touch with what's going on inside. That's the key to healing. That's it.
100%.
Right.
And 100%. And like you said, the adolescent chair is acting in so many defenses.
Yeah. But now I'm going to ask you a question, and I know it's different for everyone, but people want to know the answer to this question. I want your opinion, please. How long does it take, Karen, if we realize, if someone's listening thinking, oh my God, that's me. I'm codependent. I'm living with sarcasm all the time, ruminating thoughts, okay, I'm going to start paying attention now. I'm going to become more aware. I'm going to own it. These are my defenses. I'm in the shame blame game. I'm going to really start feeling my emotions. How quickly, and I know it depends on everyone because we're all different, but how long does it take? Like if I'm really mindful every day about like what's going on, oh, there it is again. I'm triggered again. Let me get inside of myself. What do you see? Like, how long does it really take for people to start seeing change?
It definitely depends, right? I mean, people's ability and their tolerance to connect to emotions, right? Everyone is on a spectrum. I will say this, those people who develop, if we think about these defenses, right, they are so etched into our psyche. They have become patterned responses, right, over, think about childhood, 17, 18 years, right, of learned behaviors. And so I think those people, in order to create new habits, right, and to really try to retire defenses, it takes daily mindfulness. And I think if you're able every morning to do something for recovery from codependency, or just, whether you like that word or not, just recovery from, if you notice you have a lot of reactivity in your life, whatever it is that's troubling you and is bringing you into therapy, every day, sort of having the power of intention. Here's the things that I notice are my defenses. And every day and every morning, right, setting intention, and every night doing like every night before you go to bed, look at the day. Where did you get triggered and you fell right into the defense, which is normal. That's going to happen, right? But the more you have self-awareness, the more you're going to catch yourself. The more you catch yourself, the more you can pause and breathe, whatever you need to do to slow down and just connect to self. So a lot of this work is really how much people put into it. I say for people, a lot of the work doesn't just end in a 50-minute session. A lot of the work, can you bring it out seven days a week, right? And if you make it a daily practice, I think you're going to recover sooner. And then there are cases where people have had, more extreme issues in childhood. And when there's addiction, that could take longer, because to put down the addiction is really hard and really painful. And so, everything really does depend. But I would just say the practice of mindfulness and making this a dedication will certainly help speed it up.
For sure. That was my own experience with my journey here of healing these defenses. And I want to mention this too. If you're sitting here listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, I am so fill in the blank, whether it's, again, someone with ruminating thoughts or codependency, I've blown things off when I should have paid attention, I missed red flags, etc. Please do not beat up on yourself. There's nothing productive about that. It's okay. Now's the time for change. So you've given us some beautiful, beautiful tools today. Thank you, Karen, for, what do we do now? Like, here's your way out of really healing and being able to heal that inner child. And also really, what's the word I want? Not heal our defenses, but diminish.
Surrender.
Surrender. I love that. Surrender our defenses.
Surrender.
Yeah. Yeah. Really beautiful tools here. And again, it's everyone, we just need to slow down and get in touch with ourselves, because we've disconnected from ourselves. We've got to get back in touch with ourselves. So, Karen, do you have anything else you want to share? Anything else you want to add?
I mean, just to piggyback off of what you were saying, to not at all have shame about those defenses, because those defenses were probably the teenage chair, right? Or the adolescent chair trying to protect you.
Yeah.
Right?
They're not bad. No.
Right. It's trying to protect you, but more from a primitive place.
Yeah.
So we always want to honor defenses, right? They really helped you survive, but to recognize now they're limiting you. And I think what you said was really important about not having shame if you slip into it at times, right? It's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Right.
And I think, listen, for so many people, when you're on a journey of self-discovery, hopefully this is a process, right? That is a lifelong process. And I don't mean a lifelong process that people want to suffer their whole life.
No.
But I think just that sense of curiosity and openness to yourself, just really creates an engine for growth for the rest of our lives.
We really just need to continue raising our awareness. It's a lifelong process, and we continue to raise our awareness as we go along our life journey. And that's key. That's how we catch when we are in a defense or anything, really. And that's key. And then we now have some tools on what to do next to get ourselves out. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And at many times it's a beautiful journey, even though painful at times.
I agree.
There's so many hidden jewels that start to pop up.
I agree with you on that. Self-discovery is really a fun journey, isn't it? It's like, it's scary. It's like, oh my God, we think it's the worst journey ever. But honestly, it's like, yeah, there are many gifts along the way. That's a nice way of saying it. I agree. All right, my love, another amazing podcast. Thank you. And I know that your website is under construction again, so it's taken down right now. But if people are in the New York City area, I know you're really booked up, but if they might like to have a session with you or they're looking for a good therapist, can you let us know how they can find you?
Sure. They can reach me. My email is Karen Gelstein, and it's Karen Gelstein, Gelstein. So Karen Gelstein, one word, at gmail.com.
Yeah. And I'll put that in the show notes too. If anyone's driving and you don't have a pen and paper, just go to the adult chair on the podcast page. And I promise I'll have that in there. And thank you so much. This was, again, wonderful, such valuable and rich information here for people. So I really, really, really appreciate you being on today. This is a powerful episode. Really good stuff. Thank you.
And thank you, Michelle, again, for all that you do.
I hope you all enjoyed that show. I love my time with Karen. She is a wealth of information. I'm putting her information in the show notes, as well as the show that we did together, which is the show that we did together was show number 102, and that was on love addiction and love avoidant. And she is a wealth of information. Let me just tell you, if you want to learn more about that, go listen to that show. I will put her contact information as well in the show notes. And do not forget, come check out the month of November in the membership site for free. Go to theadultchair.com/membership. And the promo code for this month is birthday. You have the whole month for free. I love you guys. Thank you for following me and being such loyal fans of this show. I really do love every single one of you, and I appreciate always all of your feedback. And also come follow me on social media. Instagram is just Michelle Chalfant. I'm also on Facebook. All right, you guys, I will be chatting with you next week, sitting here firmly in the adult chair.